It's time to get some balance back into your life, folks. Myself and Harry Powell are here to break down. Oh, you like that intro, don't you, Harry? You like that one, don't you? I brought that out with a bag last week and I saw your reaction there. I said, I'm going to do it again. We're here to break down all of the weekend's mixed martial arts action. As always, Harry Powell joins me, and we're going to take an in-depth view of all the fights that happened on the UFC Charlotte card, UFC on ABC4, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to take a look at Bellator 296 and the travesty it was to try and even watch those fights. We'll talk about that a little later on, but we're going to get straight into it here. Jailton Almeida took a big step up against Jairzinho Rozenstruik in the main event of UFC Charlotte, and he passed Harry with absolutely flying colors. There was messages flying after that fight saying, oh, we have one here. And those were the suspicions before the fight as well, really, Harry, weren't they? You know, we suspected that Jailton Almeida was going to be the special fighter. And, you know, you have to kind of pass certain tests. And, you know, the same can be said about Ian Garry, who we'll talk about in just a few moments after the couple of fights. But Jailton Almeida went in there against tough opposition. And we talked about how tough Jairzinho Rozenstruik could have been on the preview show last week. But he went in there, Harry, and he absolutely made it look easy, didn't he?
He did. My notes start with, this was just 101 grappling. And I think that for me, I'm still yet to call Jailton Almeida a special fighter, simply because there is a gulf of class. And Max Holloway talked about this before, but I think it's even more evident in the heavyweight division, where the lower echelons of the division are night and day different to the mid-tier. The mid-tier are night and day different to the upper echelon of the division. And then the elite tier of that division is night and day different to sort of the higher tier. And what we saw on Saturday night was Jailton Almeida go over and run through an upper tier fighter, right? A higher tier fighter. And it felt to me immediately as though Jairzinho Rozenstruik knew what his assignment was, because he went out there, he met Jailton in the middle of the cage, and he said, okay, I need to demand some respect right now, and started throwing shots almost immediately, which isn't something that we see Jairzinho Rozenstruik do. He's more of a calm, patient, I'll wait for a counter, I'm happy to circle off and look good doing so. But I think he went in and realized he had to stamp authority on this performance early. And Almeida said, yeah, these hands are all fun and stuff, but I'm going to double leg you across the fence. And from when he got the fight down, I messaged Spencer as we were watching it, and I said, this is done. This is absolutely finished. There's no way that Jairzinho Rozenstruik is going to be able to get back up. And he didn't. He didn't get back up until he'd been choked. And Almeida has a specific style of grappling that fits really well into MMA. He has no willingness to be on the bottom. When he finally got to the takedown inside a minute, he goes right to chest half guard. Now, chest to chest half guard in sport grappling is a really dominant position, obviously because you're flattening your opponent down to the floor and they're not able to get to a hip and use those hips effectively. But in MMA, it's even more of a dominant position because a fighter isn't able to protect themselves as adequately as they would be able to if they were on a hip fighting for an underhook using a free hand to defend their face or vice versa. And he just waited. He just waited and waited. And he looked to win the underhook from Jairzinho Rozenstruik, won the underhook. And then Jairzinho just didn't do anything. He didn't try to bridge. He didn't try to buck. He didn't try to open his knees up. At one point, he made a grave error, grave error, which is what really started the back take. As Jailton Almeida began to tripod, and what I mean by tripoding is when you have head and arm control, you can plant your forehead to the mat. And because you have such a good upper body control of your opponent, you can be more free with your legs. And so you go into sort of a pike position, but the points of contact with the floor are your forehead, your elbows, your forearms, and then obviously your feet. And that allows you to start to free your knee line from your opponent's half guard. Jailton was doing that, and Jairzinho used the hand that had the underhook to push Jailton Almeida's knee back down. Well, by doing that, he's raising his right shoulder off the floor, and Jailton uses that to force him to turtle, to force him to give his back. There's a common saying in sport grappling, it's if you can see the back, you can take it. And Jailton Almeida might as well have that tattooed at this point. And so eventually, he forces Rozenstruik into a leg drag situation, a thigh drag, leg drag situation, because he's seen the back take, jumps on his back, and Jairzinho doesn't even attempt to defend the choke, doesn't even attempt to defend his neck. As soon as he's in belly down back mount, we're done. Like, we're absolutely done.
And he didn't even make any great effort to even defend the takedown. It was likened to that of Randy Couture and James Toney's takedown, and it was like that. It was so simple. It was about as simple as a double leg that you can take, just arms around. You didn't even have him around the knees. It was more around the calves, and Jairzinho lost his balance. Didn't try to step out of it, didn't try to sprawl, just kind of accepted it. And I think you kind of explained it perfectly, the sequence of events working towards the finish, where it was like Jairzinho knew what was going to be coming, and he had in probably his own mind maybe 15 or 20 seconds inside the cage, I think, before he knew that Almeida was going to try and close the distance and take the fight down. And he was kind of resigned to that fact once it did happen. Then after it, would you be critical at all of Jairzinho Rozenstruik's kind of effort or lack of takedown defense, lack of defense? And it kind of highlights what you said about, your hesitancy about calling these fighters special as well, because you have a serious lack of well-roundedness if you can't defend a single double leg attempt. It was piss poor. It was like day one stuff, really, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And look, can I be critical? Yeah, 100%. You know what you're going in against, right? You signed a contract to fight a guy that in his previous performances has exclusively looked to run a man to the ground or run a man to the cage to then take him down and choke him. That's what you've seen, right? And so in your preparations, of course, you must work on your own strengths. You must game plan for a fight in which it goes your way. And you must game plan for a fight as in you're being able to put a guy in an arena that he feels uncomfortable with and you feel more comfortable with. And for Jairzinho Rozenstruik, obviously that arena would have been the striking battle. But for a storied kickboxer, it's not like he's adding new wrinkles to his game. For an active fighter, it's not like he's losing timing on his striking. His striking is going to be bread and butter for him. And now, whilst I'm not saying you spend an entire 6 to 8 week camp wrestling, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying if we had 10 sessions a week, I'd be expecting 3 of them to be really, really solid technical anti-grappling sessions. Then 3 of them to be hard technical sparring, purely in a grappling sense. A guy's just going to dump double legs on you. He's going to put you against the fence and you have to defend those. And then the other 3, including in your S&C and all that stuff, is just then do your striking, right? Obviously keep the timing, but a significant bulk of your 10 sessions a week should be on stopping a takedown. And if you stop a takedown and you get to chest half, how do we recover from there? Right? We've seen even a Derek Lewis have zero jiu-jitsu knowledge whatsoever, but just explodes his way out of really bad positions. And I didn't even see Jairzinho try that. It felt to me that as soon as the takedown came, he was like, I'm going to try and lock this guy's leg down in half guard for 4 more minutes and then get up and try it again.
And it's just basic survival, wasn't it, really? And it's like, when you're for me, when I'm looking at that, it's like you're putting in the weeks and weeks of an effort, knowing you're coming in there against a guy who's going to want to take you down. And then you just give it away so easy. It's a waste of a camp, a waste of a main event slot. But that's it. This is where we're at. That's what happened. It's not Jailton Almeida's fault. He went in there, he got the job done. But I think as regards to questions regarding Almeida, and I think the biggest one is what happens when he can't secure a takedown. That's the big answer that we want to find out. We didn't find out on Saturday night. He called out Tai Tuivasa. I don't know whether we're going to find out if he fights him either. It's a top 5 contender that he needs next, and it'll be interesting to see what happens when, because there was some. He looks awkward on the feet when he's standing up a little bit. He doesn't look like your kind of your comfortable striker that's well-rounded. He knows that he wants to get the fight down. He probably doesn't want to be moving on the back foot either, but he hasn't faced anyone that's forced them into those positions yet. And I mean, we're not going to have the answers to those questions until, you know, that those kind of things happen. And I'm of the opinion now that we're not going to see it until probably he's facing elite level competition at the very top of the division. And that's probably going to come, and maybe not the next fight, or maybe the fight after. Like, calling out Tuivasa is a very smart call out. I was saying in the group, calling out Cyril Gane would be a smart call out, because I don't think either one of those have the grappling prowess that they're going to need to kind of stop someone like Jailton Almeida. And I mean, what's next? What would you like to see next for him?
I'd like to see him fight Tom Aspinall, because I think Tom Aspinall will beat Marcin Tybura. Now, I say I think that is entirely based on what happens or has happened in the recovery from Tom Aspinall's leg injury. And it's entirely dependent on how Tom Aspinall comes into this fight. We've seen fighters come off horrific leg injuries like that and just not look the same. Be fearful of using the leg, be fearful of getting hit in the leg, being fearful of re-injuring another part of their body, right? And so if that's the case, well, we have significant problems in how we rank, rate, and look at somebody like Tom Aspinall. But if I can only judge the fight based on what I saw in his last performance prior to the Curtis Blades fight, and if that Tom Aspinall turns up, he will beat Marcin Tybura. I think he probably outstrikes him on the feet, and he probably takes him out and submits him. Or if he doesn't, he lands some significant damage on the ground. And so, to me, the fighter is Tom Aspinall, because that's an absolutely gargantuan fight that you can headline maybe a UFC London at some point in the future, whether that's the second one in July, if not July, the second one if they do one this year, or if they go next calendar year in March. That's perfect for that fight. We're going to have John Jones versus Stipe Miocic supposedly in November. I don't think November to March is a drastic amount of time to wait. Maybe they do an interim title then, whatever it is. But you need Cyril Gane to go and get another win against somebody, right? Whoever that is. You need the fresh blood to come through. But if we're talking about tests for Jailton Almeida, I think Tom Aspinall is the guy. Because if he beats Tom Aspinall, well, then we have to do a John Jones or a Stipe Miocic, right? That's the fight, because Tom Aspinall can do the everything, and there's not many other fighters in that heavyweight division who can do the everything as well as Tom Aspinall can do the everything. And so I think that's the fight I would like to see. I think I agree with you completely that Jailton Almeida calling out Tai Tuivasa is the smartest that he could have gone for. The other person he could have called out is Derek Lewis, right? Similar type of fighters. But yeah, I mean, that or give him Pavlovich.
Yeah. There's a bit of a backup at the top of the heavyweight division, so there's plenty of options for him. And yeah, hopefully we do get to see that test, because I had a feeling this was going to happen, but I was still kind of maybe a little bit optimistic that Jairzinho might have put up a bit more of a fight, but it was not to be in the main event. Two lads that did put up plenty of fight was Johnny Walker and Anthony Smith in the co-main event. And I know we might have a little bit of a difference of opinion here in regards to Johnny Walker and his performance. And I mean, was it a pitch perfect performance? Not in the slightest, don't get me wrong. But I mean, we're kind of at this crossroads with Johnny Walker, I feel right now, Harry, where if he goes out there and he goes too wild, we are criticize him for doing that. If he goes out there and is tentative like he did against Thiago Santos, we're criticizing him for doing that as well. We saw a little bit of both last night. He fought a very dangerous guy and a tough guy in Anthony Smith, who weathered a lot of the storm and was hurt. Now, do I feel Johnny Walker could have finished that fight if he pushed on more? I think he could have, but he's caught in a predicament where, you know, he's pushed on for fights before and got caught. Maybe those instances are in the back of his mind. I mean, I'm not going to be too critical on his performance last night. Was it a championship worthy performance? I don't think so. Does he have some things to work on? Yes, he does. But I think if we kind of slow build him, they will get better. He will gain some confidence from that fight. He got some criticism from Dana White about his lack of killer instinct, shall we say. And I mean, that I think that criticism is is somewhat fair too, but I don't think we should be going all too hard on the paint. And I'm just curious to hear your opinion on the fight itself and his performance.
So I think the criticism I have mainly surrounds the final round. The main criticism I have is Johnny Walker had done such a good job with the leg kicks that by the end or the midway through the third round, Anthony Smith was unable to use the left leg effectively, right? He wasn't able to land the jab at the same clip he was landing in the first round, and he wasn't able to move anywhere near as effectively. Now, I'm not saying Johnny Walker has to go out and immediately start spamming flying knees. I'm not saying I want wheel kicks and this and that, the next thing. But if the left leg is compromised and you've been attacking it for 3 rounds, let's see just some variation and try to push the pace a little bit, because Anthony Smith was tired, he was hurt, and he was looking for a way out. And what I mean by that was, when he got dropped, he wasn't immediately looking to improve his position. It looked for a moment as though he was cowering up, looking for the referee to step in. And now, okay, the referee did not step in, and Johnny Walker did not then pile on the pressure to finish the fight. But we're going to talk about Ian Garry in a second. And Ian Garry masterfully set up a high kick that put away his man, right? Well, if Johnny Walker had thrown a couple of feints or even just landed a couple more leg kicks, a body kick with devastating power or a head kick with devastating power would have been available to him. We've seen it time and time again, that you go low, you hurt your man low, and then you fake low to go high, or you fake high to go low, right? And so with a man of Johnny Walker's power and dexterity, and he was landing the body kick on Anthony Smith all night long, right? I just wanted to see a little bit more in that third, because I agree with you that there has to be a balance between the chaos and the technical point fighting. Because if you go in and you try and do straight chaos against a Yuri Prochazka, a Magomed Ankalaev, Jamal Hill, a Blachowicz, it may not go well for you, right? Because these guys are really, really good technically and also carry that big power. But I feel as though my question for Johnny Walker is, at 31 years of age, after having suffered a few pretty horrendous finishes, is he going to have the time, especially where he is in the division right now? Because we look at where he is, he's just beaten number 8 or number 7, whatever Anthony Smith was before that. Well, you're not going to get anyone that doesn't have the name Blachowicz, Jamal Hill, Ankalaev, Prochazka, Rakic, or Krylov. You know, those are the names.
Yeah.
And so which one of those do you want? Which one of those do you call out as Johnny Walker, to be able to meander and navigate yourself in a way that you can continue to grow, but also be winning fights? I think it's a tough spot right now.
It is. Like, I don't argue anything that you say there whatsoever. And I thought that you spoke very well about it, because there's people that are going in hard on the paint, but like the hesitancy to finish because of the danger, maybe it makes more sense in round 1 and round 2, but definitely in round 3, that danger seems to have subsided. Anthony Smith was basically on one leg, and I do feel he could have probably pushed on, and you know, I think that's a fair criticism. But also on the other end of the stick, I feel that that's probably a fight that Johnny Walker might have lost a year ago or maybe 2 years ago as well. So, I mean, that's where I'm looking at it. But it's absolutely, we're coming into the business now. Anthony Smith was ranked number 5. So Johnny Walker will come in and he will be in the top 5 in the light heavyweight division. And there is going to be no easy tests or no easy outs in that area of the division right now. Plus, we have a guy called Alex Pereira that's going to be coming up there as well, who was, you know, you're not going to be able to fight that kind of fight against a guy like Alex Pereira. You're not going to be able to fight that kind of a fight against Jamal Hill. You're not going to be able to fight that kind of a fight against Yuri Prochazka or Ankalaev, or the majority of the guys, or even Jan Blachowicz is not going to let you away with that. For Anthony Smith, where do you lie with him? You know, I don't know. I know we don't like to say too much that people should maybe look to kind of go down different avenues and hang it up, but I kind of feel that way with Anthony Smith. And I feel a lot easier saying that because he has other avenues. He has the podcasts, he has the kind of presenting duties. He's on the desk for the UFC doing his analysis. And I mean, I tweeted out last night, I think Anthony Smith needs to be saved from himself because he's just too tough for his own good. He clearly has a compromised leg. That leg that was hurt again last night was one that we've seen that was hurt in previous fights as well. So, I mean, is he properly compromised where, look, it's not easy to eat leg kicks from a guy like Johnny Walker anyway. He's going to be landing heavy. But, I mean, at this stage, a win for Anthony Smith might have kept him back into the kind of title picture, but the loss sends him back down. And where he's at right now, I'm wondering, is it worth it? He had his gloves off in the cage last night. He says he has to do a lot of deep thinking. Where do you see him lying? Do you think he has a future in the light heavyweight division? And would you like to see him again?
So I don't know whether he has a future. I don't know whether he wants to retire or not retire. I said live when I was watching it, he walked out, he looked emotional. He was giving all of his fight kit away, which is an odd thing to do for a fighter. Anyway, like when he first gave his jacket, I was like, oh, that's a really cool gesture. Like that was pretty awesome. And then the hat came off and he gave that to somebody. And I was like, oh, that's a bit strange. And then the t-shirt came off and he gave that to somebody. And then he embraced his wife and his daughter, or his partner and his daughter, whatever. I don't know the circumstances. And then he looks emotional. He looks like he's gathering himself. He looks like takes his deep breaths and is in a situation where he's like, oh, I'm drinking all of this in. I'm drinking in the emotion. And live, I was kind of like, is this a retirement fight? Or is this in pre-fight week, he'd come in and he'd said, look, I'm just so grateful to be able to do this again. You know, like I've had the injuries, I've had the this, I've had the that. I'm just really grateful to be able to make the walk and do the thing that I love. And so I was conflicted because on one hand, that behavior wasn't the behavior of somebody just enjoying to be back. It was somebody savoring the moment as if it was the last one.
Yeah, and even an incident throughout the fight when they started talking to each other where Anthony Smith was kind of like, you were talking about my family. And Johnny Walker was like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know whether it did happen or not or what, but it was like Anthony Smith trying to manifest these kind of stories or what happened to try and look to me like it was trying to kind of give himself some motivation throughout the fight to get going. And to me, that's not a good sign either when you're trying to do that as well. Like, I mean, having a conversation mid-fight is not what you want to be doing either which way, no matter what you're saying. But it's like, I mean, Anthony Smith, I like him. I like him as a fighter. I like him as a personality. You just don't want to see him going in there. Like, I mean, he has over 50 fights in there now, Harry. And I mean, it's getting to the stage right now is where he's probably saying that he has to kind of reflect and see, but he's going to be asking himself, what am I doing this for now? Am I doing this for the paycheck? Am I doing this because I love it? Am I doing this because I think I can get back to a title run? Well, I think that last choice, I don't think he's getting back to a title run. I don't think he's getting that within an ass's roar, really, to be honest, of the title again. So it's going to be a lot of soul searching for Anthony Smith, and it'll be interesting to see what he does eventually down the line. But we shall move on. Any final thoughts on that fight before we move on, Harry? We all good. Let's talk about Ian Garry and the fantastic performance. He went out there and took out Daniel Rodriguez in one round. The first guy ever to stop Daniel Rodriguez in 21 fights. And it was a masterful performance, in my opinion. I think Ian Garry had a really, really good week overall this week. This was a really good week. Carried himself well, performed excellently, called his shots after the fight. Everything made sense. Everything aligned. But I mean, you can have all your bows and your bells and your whistles, Harry, but it means nothing unless you go out there and put in a performance like Ian Garry did inside the cage. And you mentioned the use of the kick. And I think that was the key factor in this fight. He spoke about it after the fight as well. Called his shot weeks and weeks ago, saying that he was looking for the right head kick. We've seen that before against Rostam Akman. but he used it in a different way. Whereas that we've seen Ian Garry hide that high kick behind his straight right hand before. This time he used it so excellently in numerous occasions and numerous ways. Number one, striking with the right kick to the body obviously controls the left hand of Daniel Rodriguez, where you're looking to protect that body. So he got him thinking about that. He got Daniel Rodriguez hesitant to throw off that left hand because of that kick as well. But it also excellently set up the final high kick as well. And it was just lovely fight IQ, lovely tactics, and he just pulled it off excellently. I mean, really, really his best performance when his toughest challenge in the octagon. And I mean, you can't say enough good things about Ian Machado Garry.
Absolutely. I'll start with the single criticism I have, and that's just so we can get that out of the way and we can talk about how good the rest of it was. And that was, he just started a touch slow for me. There was inside the first 20 seconds, he bounced in and thought, this lad's shit. And then Rodriguez lands a jab on him, and Garry immediately wakes up and just goes to fucking work. And I'm not saying that that has to be fixed necessarily, or that he's going to get punished with that later on down the line. It's just an observation that it took a moment just to wake up.
And you could argue that in previous fights it's took him even longer than this to wake up. And I think you're that's a very good observation. And I think that's, you know, what maybe caused the mistake against Song Kenan in the last fight. And you were right. It didn't take him too long here. It was the first exchange. I think they both traded jabs as well. And Daniel Rodriguez got off, Ian Garry got off. But like you said, it was off to the races then. And I'm curious to hear your analytical breakdown on that, Harry. And I'm sure as this is getting released, I'm not too sure, we're recording this on Sunday. The spotlight, I'm sure, is going to be shone on Ian Garry on the Monday article as well.
It absolutely is, yeah. The thing that impressed me the most for Ian is in previous performances, we've talked about how he's clearly better skill for skill than his opponent, but whether there's a conscientious effort to get minutes under his belt, or whether it's because he doesn't necessarily have the confidence in that specific moment to go and actually perform and move from first to third gear, we've seen him just sort of grind decisions out or run decisions at sort of at a canter, really. And the two things that massively impressed me in this fight was, the first was the variety, because the variety of everything caused Daniel Rodriguez to have absolute fits and starts. And as always, it starts with the footwork, right? Ian Garry bounds in and bounds out, cuts an angle, moves his left foot, moves his right foot, switches, offers Daniel Rodriguez some feints. Rodriguez starts biting hard, and Garry says, okay, I'm going to make you miss. And so he steps in, allows D-Rod to throw a check left hook or a jab, comes back out and punishes him immediately. The counter-striking from Ian Garry in this was fantastic, because he's saying to D-Rod, well, you can throw, but I'll catch you. And I'm going to catch this low leg kick. Oh, and we're standing out here and we're just in open space. Take this body kick. And in every facet of range, other than the clinch situation, which he won as well, by the way, he was saying to D-Rod, there's nothing here for you. Every moment you have something to offer, these big overreaching leaping shots I'm forcing you to throw because my footwork and my head position is great and my range management is just even better, you're going to miss, and then I'm going to punish you. And so that forces your fighter to shell up a little bit. And when he shells up a little bit, you start to tee off a little bit, because you've got more freedom. You know that there is a deep tactical awareness in your opponent that they've tried their A game and it's failed inside a couple of minutes. And so Garry starts to tee off more and more and more. Low kicks, body kicks, low kicks, body kicks. And he shows D-Rod the right high kick as he comes with a question mark kick, and it sort of slaps across the chin, slaps across the jaw. Now, we've seen fellas rocked and wobbled by that before, and I think D-Rod was startled by it. I don't think he was wobbled or anywhere near looking for a way out of the fight. But Garry showed him and said, this is here, by the way, and it's coming again. And so he goes back to the body, angles off, throws the right high kick, shin perfect, draws a perfect hot iron across the jaw behind the ear. D-Rod wobbles. And then this actually was even more impressive to me, is the finishing sequence, right? Garry laser focused, isn't enamored by the kick, doesn't spend time watching his work, doesn't spend time wheeling around and praising as D-Rod goes down, immediately advances forward in a perfect stance formation, doesn't square his hips up, throws a right hand and an uppercut to make sure D-Rod's on his way down. And when he's down, lands all of the coffin nails he needs to make the referee step in. And how many times have we seen a fighter throw a shot, hurt his opponent, and then fuck the finish up? Loads and loads and loads. So we've talked about confidence, the ability to go out, cycle through the gears, and really take it to your man. That was a new wrinkle that we hadn't seen until he got dropped by Song Kanan. And then he comes out and says, fuck this guy. I'm better than him. I can't be having this. I'm going. Grand.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry.
Just you mentioned about some of the advancements from the Song Kanan fight, right? And there was one moment in the fight that I want to pinpoint as well, when Ian found himself in the pocket, and it was the time where he was throwing his combination, and mid combination, D-Rod came back with a counter of his own. Ian Garry ducked under and came back with a left hook right hand as well, and that showed to me is that, yeah, I did get caught in the pocket against Song Kanan, but you know what I've been doing? I've been going back and I've been working on that. And now I'm going to be moving and doing that's great head work and awareness there as well. And that shows me a level of improvement as well, and acknowledgement of the mistake that was made in previous fights. And if you're going to get to the top, you have to make those acknowledgements as well. And that, I thought that was like a big statement to everyone who said that he made that mistake against Song Kanan. And I think he's gone back and he's worked on that, and he will continue to work on those kind of things. For me, I felt that he was going to be obviously too quick, too elusive on the feet. And I felt that he was going to work off his jab a lot more than he did, but he didn't. He worked off that body kick, and he worked off that right kick, whether it was low, whether it was high, but he went to the body early. And then it was just simply to set up that high kick as well. And yes, it wasn't like a killer knockout blow, but I think you explained it perfectly, is that D-Rod felt that, and D-Rod probably was wobbled by that as well, but he didn't want to feel that again. And the follow-up shots encouraged him to go down, and he had enough at that stage. He kind of knew the way the landscape of the fight was going to play out, even if he did tough out that position. And it was just excellent work. I mean, to come in there with the weight of the words, like, he's a confident, brash guy, but I mean, there's no doubt that he's feeling it. And when you're going out there and predicting your shots, and you're confident and you're saying you're going to do this, that adds extra pressure. But Ian Garry kind of seems to flourish in all that kind of pressure. And I mean, it was, I had said his previous best performance before this was the Jack Grant fight, but this is it. This performance blows it away, because it's the occasion, it's the opponent, and it's the opportunity that lay in front of him as well, an opportunity to get up into the rankings in the welterweight division. And I mean, he ticked off all the boxes here with flying colors. And I mean, and it's off to the races now, Harry. I mean, we're getting into the business end of things now with Ian Garry. And while there may have been slight doubts or slight wonders, I feel it's ready. And I feel now is the time, especially with performances like that.
I agree. I wouldn't have any problem. Like he mentioned on the microphone afterwards, he's got a 6 or a 7 fight plan to get him to a title shot. If he keeps performing like that, it's not going to take him 6 or 7 fights. I don't see so. But I also like that he's called out Neil Magny. I don't mind that fight whatsoever. I think it's a perfect stylistic matchup for him. It's the perfect name value for him.
100%.
If I was to offer some other names, I'd have no problem seeing him fight a Kevin Holland. I know that Kevin Holland is 185, whatever, but if you wanted to make a drop to 170, I'd have no problem seeing that. I'd have no problem seeing a Gunnar Nelson. Mm-hmm. If we want to push him a little bit and give him an interesting grappling test, I'd have no problem with Michael Chiesa.
That's what I've been looking for as well, is that kind of grappling test. And Magny might provide that test for him, but I feel Ian Garry does have the beatings of Neil Magny fairly easily. But it's just like ticking off. It was like, and I don't want to compare him to McGregor at all, but it's like with McGregor, even when he was fighting up at the very top, it was like that grappling test. It's like, oh, he hasn't fought a grappler yet. And it's like, well, there's plenty of grapplers there. We're just not grapple heavy, maybe stylistic guys that Conor fought, and same with Ian Garry as well. He's fought fairly friendly, stylistic matchups to date. But now, I mean, we're not going to have a choice. I mean, I think Neil Magny is the next best step for him. It's the one that makes the most sense. But yeah, you do have your Gunnar Nelsons. You do have, maybe after that, you could have the prospect test. You know, we have Jack Della Maddalena and we have Sean Brady, who are fighting in the top 10. And, you know, we have the young and rising prospect test that Ian Garry could face after that as well. I guess he'll get the veteran test with Neil Magny, but his options are kind of endless, and they're even more endless now, really, after a performance like that on Saturday night.
I agree. No, I agree. And I hate the Conor McGregor comparisons. I'll just state that. In the promo before, when they're flicking between him and McGregor and whatever, I'm like, this is awful. Like, don't do this.
They're going to do it though. They're definitely are. And it's like, I think, you know, it's probably something that all Irish fighters might be labeled with for a while. I tried to steer away from it as much as possible, but I think with Ian Garry, he's trying to manufacture that kind of relationship as well. And he's going to be probably put on the same card as him eventually as well. But I would imagine Ian Garry, hopefully amongst other Irish fighters as well, will be on the next McGregor card whenever that may happen. And I mean, that comparison is going to probably be put into our face, whether we like it or not, really, to be honest. But I mean, I think we have the responsibility. Like, we can talk about it if we want to, and we can not talk about it. And I think Ian Garry and Conor McGregor are completely different fighters. I think they're absolutely almost completely different personalities as well, to be honest. And I mean, you know, no one can compare to Conor McGregor and what he did and the stardom that he has right now. And I mean, I understand it with Ian Garry, but it's like, I just don't want every Irish fighter to be kind of put under that label. Obviously, McGregor did have that influence on him and stuff like that, but I think it's more important for Ian Garry to be Ian Garry. Just be Ian Garry. That's all you need to be. Go out there and talk your talk, and go out there and perform like you need to do. And I think, you know what? I think it was his absolute best showing overall. Like, take the pizza video and stuff like that. I give or take that, but I mean, how he handled himself in the interviews before the fight, post fight, ticked off all the boxes for me.
Yeah, I mean, my personal preference is when Ian Garry was fighting in Cage Warriors, there was a confidence, a brashness, if you will, but there was a confidence based on skill development, on skill awareness. And that's the type of fighter that I like to see. I don't care about all the other superfluous character building, you know, anime, pro wrestling type stuff. In that, what I mean is there's this exaggeration of character and this manufacturing of character. I don't really care for that, because it feels in some way to me as though it kind of devalues the actual fighting, because you're beginning and regaling a political argument to a fan base in order to get them to watch you or not watch you do the fighting, right? They either want to see you win or they want to see you lose. That old McGregor quote of hate you or not, as long as they're paying, or Floyd Mayweather, whoever it is that said it, right? Whatever. But like, it's true to an extent, but I also think that MMA is so raw and so unadulterated in so many ways, so chaotic in so many ways, that you're right that if you're just yourself, whoever that is, and if this is Ian Garry, fine. But from historical understandings, and we've watched his career from his debut to now, there's been a change in his personality. There's been a change in the way he handles himself and certain things that he does to build fights. But if you're yourself and you go out and put performances on like that, you'll be a star in absolute no time. But then
100%.
there's always a sorry, I'll finish quickly. There's always like a with a Colby Covington, and obviously that's an egregious example. But with a Colby Covington, people see through the character. And in MMA, I feel like the character is not as welcome as the honest, raw, just open fighter.
Mm-hmm. And like with Ian Garry, look, he's a young man. He's 25. He's got a lot of moving parts in his life right now, so he's handling everything and the trajectory of his career quite well at the minute, to be honest. But to me, if you ask me who Ian Garry is the guy that we saw for 2 minutes and 57 seconds on Saturday night inside the cage. That's who Ian Garry is, and that's That's what I'll focus on, because you can have everything else. You don't go out there and perform. It's not all worth nothing at the end of the day. And I'm glad he's in this position. I think he's ready for the next step as well. And it's a real exciting time in the world of Ian Garry and in Irish mixed martial arts as a whole. And we could probably spend an hour talking about this, Harry, but we must move on. We'll talk about some of the rest of the card before moving over, talk a bit of Bellator. Carlos Ulberg took out Ihor Potieria. Very good performance. Just a vintage Carlos Ulberg performance at this stage. Kind of played around on the feet, found a beautiful left hook and followed up with the ground strikes. It was a wonderful performance and a wonderful finish, wasn't it, Harry?
I think this, sooner rather than later, MMA as a whole is going to have to realize that big looping overhand shots are dead and they do not work anymore, because straight shots and counter hooks are going to win every single time. And Ulberg was just waiting, right? Kept his range management fine. Obviously has a relatively storied kickboxing background, has been with City Kickboxing for quite a while, and so comes in here with a bit of pedigree behind him in his striking, and he just looks clean and tidy, right? There's not a ton of mess, there's not a ton of inefficiency, and he moves and he waits, and Pretoria dives in with some random overhand Tekken smash button stuff, and Ulberg just cuts the angle and drops him clean. And, you know, he lands enough shots and wheels away himself. He does the referee's job for him. He knows that Pretoria's had enough. He knows he's not turning back up. He knows he's not looking to stay in the fight. And so off he goes. And, you know, unfortunately has to second guess himself and whatever, but eventually wheels away. And I just think that this fight, if anyone wants to see, and again, we're not watching Rodtang or Stamp Fairtex here in Carlos Ulberg. We're not looking at the absolute upper echelons of pure striking. We're not watching a Jonathan Haggerty or a Liam Harrison or a whatever. We're just watching some fella that's got a little bit more kickboxing experience than your average MMA guy who just wants to throw overhand rights and big looping shots. And in modern MMA, sooner rather than later, these sorts of behaviors will be dead, and we'll be seeing far crisper, far cleaner, far more efficient striking. And that's exactly what Ulberg did.
Oh, yeah, it was a wonderful performance. I couldn't really follow that up with anything else. I think you broke it down excellently as well. He'll move on up under the division. He'll probably be looking at maybe ranked opposition next, and I think he deserves that as well. So it'll be exciting to see what's next for Carlos Ulberg. Moving on down, we had a spinning guillotine choke from Alex Morono. It was absolutely wonderful. I've never seen a sequence like this before. Coming in from a spinning back fist, just snatched the neck of Tim Means and got in, just closed out that guillotine choke excellently. When Alex Morono gets into those positions, he's so good at finishing them off, isn't he, Harry? Like, you're sitting into it. The idea with an arm in guillotine, obviously you have to sit up into it and scrunch your shoulders forward and putting pressure down on the back of the neck, as opposed to with a non-arm where you can lean back and use your hips to kind of get that choke. I think Alex Morono, it was another wonderful performance from him and a typical Alex Morono performance. But the finish was very unique and I quite enjoyed it. Did you?
Yeah, it was a close fight. Like,
it was, yeah.
Morono was doing a really good job at, again, countering with check left hooks for slightly weird overhand shots, but he'd given up a bit of range and a bit of height, and there was moments in there when Tim Means was throwing and landing, like, he looked good, and that first round was competitive. Like, I don't know how I scored that first round. I have to go back and watch it again, but like, the spinning back fist, Tim Means, all he needed to do was shoot a double leg without his head on the inside, and he would have been safe from that guillotine, right? And he didn't. Fine. And Morono finishes an arm in guillotine exactly as you'd want to finish an arm in guillotine, wraps up accordingly so that Tim Means can't roll to escape, jacks up his shoulder, forces the posture to be broken, and gets a relatively quick tap, right? And immediately when Morono lets go, Tim Means says, good work, dude, you got me. I fucked up, you got me. And
yeah,
Alex Morono is one of these guys at 170 where, let's see an Alex Morono, Ian Garry. Like,
yeah.
you want a veteran test, and maybe if Neil Magny isn't available, chuck Alex Morono in there, because we see against Rhys McKee that if you're not on your night, Alex Morono will beat you. Like, he's a very tidy, well put together veteran fighter. And I don't think people really respect that position enough.
No, he is like, he's one of those guys who you're going to, like, he's the ultimate test for any fighter. Like, even when you look at that Santiago Ponzinibbio lost as well, he was winning that fight until he got caught. You know what I mean? And you take that out of it, that would have made it a 6-fight win streak for him. So he's 1-5 in his last 6. And I mean, that's pretty impressive in the welterweight division as well. So all credit to Alex Morono. He's a guy who I'm always looking forward to seeing fighting when you get in there. And I think that's a testament to the type of fighter that he is. So credit to him. A couple of legends went down and threw down, I should say, in the headliner and the prelims. Matt Brown reeling back the years and doing what he does best, catches Court McGee with a right hook. It was a wonderful finish. It was brilliant that there's 2 things that stood out to me here. It was brilliant that Matt Brown was fully aware of the situation, that he knew he didn't need to follow up. And it was Court McGee was fully aware of his situation too, where he knew he got caught and he was unwilling to kind of battle through it because, you know, it was just smart thinking and not taking much damage, because I don't know if it would have went too well for him after getting caught with a big shot like that. So it's just kind of great to see Matt Brown in there in 2023. And obviously Court McGee, a great fighter, great guy as well. Unfortunately, he had to be on the receiving end of the knockout. But Matt motherfucking Brown, Harry, Matt motherfucking Brown. What an OG, what a fighter. And it's great to see him get that moment as well.
Yeah, Again, I don't say this very often, but I'd like to see neither of them fight again. I mean, it's likely that they'll do a Matt Brown send-off somewhere, but Court McGee now 2 pretty devastating finishes in his last 2, after having never been finished or knocked out at least before. It was worrying because Matt Brown, to begin with, looked old, looked slow.
Looked so slow. Like when he threw the first combo, I was like, oh no, this is not good. Like, looked really, really slow.
And Court McGee, if you're fighting Court McGee and he looks lightning fast, there's a problem. Right? There's a problem. That's not to say Court McGee isn't, but Court McGee is at the tail end of his career as well, right? Like, and you see Matt Brown slow throw, and he looks like he's fighting in a pool of custard, and that's not a great sign at all. And now, look, the finish was wonderful. Court McGee overreached. Brown took an angle, landed a right hand on him, and he goes home. Fantastic. But for both guys, right? Court McGee, as I say, back-to-back knockouts, tail end of his career. What do we need more knockouts for? I don't think we do. And for Matt Brown, Matt Brown isn't doing the Jim Miller route, where it's give me a veteran or give me the new, young, hungry, needs a test debut guy. He's not doing that. He's taking OG tests only, right? And there's not many OGs left for him to fight. And so if I'm Matt Brown, if you want to take one more and do the ride off into the sunset and tell the UFC it's your last one and do the whole thing, fine, no problem, because he deserves that. He deserves to be honored with the VT and the talk in the booth and the this and the that. All that's fine, no problem. But I don't want to be seeing Matt Brown taking on many, many more fights.
No, not at all. I'm 100% in agreement with that opinion as well, Harry. Another thing that you didn't want to see was Carl Williams and Chase Sherman. We're not going to spend any time on that. It was a unanimous decision win for Carl Williams. Chase Sherman drops to 2-7 in his last whatever. He should be gone. Let's spend a little bit of time on Douglas Silva de Andrade, who took on Cody Stamann. Controversial kind of sequence in the first round here, where Stamann was kind of brushed with an up kick while de Andrade was on his back. Referee stopped the action, gave him time, never gave the kind of position back there, which kind of led to a close second round too. Stamann took round 3, really close fight, but I think it was the sequence of events in the first round that caused a bit of a stir, Harry. But good win for de Andrade. I know Stamann they're talking about maybe trying to get it turned to a no contest or whatnot. I doubt that's going to happen. What's your thoughts on maybe what happened in the first round and the fight as a whole?
I agree with you. The fight as a whole was close. Both of them were super evenly matched. I'd have liked to have seen Stamann try a couple more leg kicks. He didn't use his jab anywhere near as much as maybe he should have. Both guys were just looking to counter each other with massive shots, and that made for a fun fight, right? But it didn't make for a fight where I think Stamen was the better fighter and probably should have done a little bit more. Do the old Trevor Whitman, as we've talked about so many times. Take 20% off your shots and throw 20% more shots. And I think he would have found the counters much easier. In the first round, I actually reached out to Mr. Sean T. Sheehan himself, and I said, is that the correct call? Because obviously he'd done the work to get the fight to the ground. There was a positional change, right? He takes an up kick. It felt to me more like Da Silva de Andrade was trying to push him away rather than actually kick him. However, it was seen, whatever, the referee stops the fight, gives Cody Stamen some time, whatever. They reset on the feet. And I asked Sean, is that the correct ruling? And he said, yes, it is the correct ruling. Whether we agree with the ruling or not, the ruling stands. And so they have to start back on the feet. But yeah, I mean, kind of is what it is. If you're not going to take a point for what you determine to be a foul, and this sort of brings us back to this conversation, right? What's the point in a foul if you don't get a point taken? Like, what?
Yeah, that's my kind of opinion, is that, okay, say what you want about the actual strike itself. It was a fairly soft strike, but the fighter reacted and the referee reacted. So in my opinion, I feel, and this is where we don't have any clarity with these kind of things, and whether I would have been understanding that the position should have been given back there, because you stopped the fight in that position. So why it's kind of like a disadvantage to put it back down or to put it back up on the feet. So that ruling doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, to be honest.
Yeah. I think the thing that frustrates me is, like, I agree the ruling isn't great, and especially if a fighter has earned a positional change and then is fouled. If Cody Stamen did the fouling, I understand, fine.
Yeah, 100%, big time.
But if he was fouled himself, I struggle with that ruling. But the thing that actually frustrates me more is that what we don't have clarity on is how many fouls can I make before a point's taken, right? We're going to talk about Kim Boehm soon, and there's 2 fouls there. And the first foul gets a point taken, grand. Second foul ends the fight, fine. But so why is the kick after the bell in the Kim Boehm fight worthy of a point, and the Stamen Silva de Andrade fight, why is that kick not worth a point taking? Do you know what I mean? Like, that lack of
it probably comes down to intentional strikes and unintentional strikes, and I think there was both were intentional.
Yeah, of course. Like, Silva de Andrade absolutely wanted to get Cody Stamen off him and was using his leg to get him off him. Now, did he mean to plant the strike in his face? No, probably not. He probably meant to kick him in the neck.
That's what I kind of mean. I think he was more so trying to push off the body, whereas I think after the fight and the force of the kick that Ji Young Kim threw, I think that can be labeled as intentional as well, because, you know, it was just absolutely idiotic. Let's finish off on De Andrade and Cody Stamen. There was a bit of controversy around the decision. No controversy in my eyes. I think De Andrade won a close fight, and you can't really argue all that much. And it was just strange. I'm not too upset about what happened in the first round of that fight. It's just an observation, point of conversation. I mean, yeah, it's just kind of, there's no clarity in those situations. It seems to be based off, you know, what the referee's opinion of a situation is. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest. It's not really a great thing, because you want the same ruling to happen throughout all the different fights for the same different reasons. So, I mean, we'll put that to bed. We'll talk about Mandy Bowen and Ji Young Kim and the madness around that fight. And I mean, Ji Young Kim, like, what was she doing, Harry? I mean, you hadn't watched the fight, and I just texted you and I had said, you're going to go absolutely insane when you watch this fight, because the fight kicks off and the first exchange happens, and Ji Young Kim absolutely rocks Mandy Bowen and has her on skates from the get-go. Then she proceeds to kind of get involved in grappling exchanges and refuses to separate and strike, where she looked to have the clear advantage on the feet, looked to have the clear power advantage as well. And just, it seemed to me she wanted to do anything in her powers to kind of lose this fight for herself. It was just a baffling performance from Ji Young Kim, wasn't it, Harry?
Look, there are fights, right? And I just don't understand what fighters are doing. Like, you go out and you hurt a fighter. As we said with Ian Garry, you then have to pick your shots. You then have to finish the fight, or you have to continue to hurt your opponent and rack up your points with the judges. But Ji Young Kim goes out, lands a really nice 1-2, rocks Mandy Boehm, and then just bundles her way into getting Uchi mattered somehow, then finds herself doing everything incorrectly. Mandy Boehm's on her back. She's defending chokes. Now, all of a sudden, Mandy Boehm has started, Kim's not even defending her neck and just trying to stand up from a fucking back take. Like, what are we doing? Then she eventually, somehow, by the grace of God, manages to turn inside. And now Mandy Boehm's defending her neck 15 seconds later. Like, there is a discussion to be had about what the UFC brand is and the level of caliber of fighter that we're having. And this fight, to me, was two really poor fighters fighting really poorly, right? And Ji Young Kim can protest the kick out in the first round, but it's egregious. The referee, the bell's gone. The referee's touched them both. He's called time. Mandy Boehm has disengaged from the position, and then Ji Young Kim just lashes out. Just completely idiotic.
There was a lot of chit chat before the fight, maybe a little bit of heat coming into the fight, but Ji Young Kim looked to have let her emotions get the better of her in this fight, and you absolutely can't do that when you're in there. You know what I mean? And it was just, if you're her coaching team, you've got to be super, super frustrated, because they were even telling her in the corner, Harry, don't get involved in the clinch. And then, she comes out in round 2 and it's the same thing again. Clips her on the feet, gets involved in the clinch, ends up on her back again. It's just, I don't know, man. I just don't know at this stage. It's just, that's kind of what those fighters are, I guess. It's just the difference between elite level fighting and non-elite level fighting. Poor judgmental, illegal shots. How did you think the referee handled the whole situation?
Pretty well. The kick comes in. He stops. He speaks to Ji Young Kim and says, like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, get over to your corner. Then I don't know whether he consults Mandy Boehm, make sure she's okay to continue. I mean, it was a kick to the midriff, right? Like, it's not like a, whatever. And then immediately takes the point. Fine. No problem with that whatsoever. I think that's the right call. And then as soon as Mandy Boehm got to that back body lock position where Ji Young Kim had cut an angle and Mandy Boehm had one hand down, I was waiting for the knee. I didn't know that it was an illegal knee that stopped the fight, but I just knew it was coming. And then it lands, and you can why? How many fucking times are we going to see this? Like, we know that one hand down means a grounded fighter, no knees to the head. Like, if I know this, how is it that professional fighters fighting in the UFC don't know this? And I also understand that when you're in there, emotions run high and everything else, but you absolutely understand the rules that you're abiding by. Like, how many times in the football games that you play on the weekends have you just gone and head kicked a fella? Never. You just haven't. Why? Because you understand the rules that you're abiding by. Like, you might stand on a guy's toes by accident when you're going for a challenge. All right, fine. That's par for the course. But you've never gone and fucking Eric Cantona'd a fella because, he took the ball from you or whatever. You haven't, because you just don't. You don't just run up to the ball, pick it up, run to the other side of the pitch and boot it in the goal and go celebrate, because you understand the rules that you're abiding by. And the pressure and the emotion of a football game is similar to the pressure of the emotion. It's a sport at the end of the day. And it's horrific stuff. Absolutely fucking horrific stuff.
Yeah, it's quite frustrating to watch as well. But it was a need to a grounded opponent. The referee did well, took the point. A little bit of confusion after the fight. Mandy Boehm did go on, win a split decision, which kind of tells the story of the fight as well. Ji Young Kim lost 2 points and still was up on one of the scorecards as well, which I don't understand either. But I think they scored around 3 for her as well. But anyway, how's and ever, Mandy Boehm. Question I have for you real quick, and maybe we can spend it longer on this. How do you feel about the introduction of knees to a grounded opponent into kind of unified mixed martial arts rule to kind of steer away from these kind of, number one, fighters playing the game. And I'm not saying that Mandy Bowen was playing the game here, because she was on two of her knees. She wasn't trying to put her hand down to steer away. But how do you feel about the introduction of knees to a grounded opponent? For maybe it would kind of increase in entertainment and stop stalling and stop incidents like this as well. It just cuts out a lot of the BS. I would be for it at this stage now. I was always on the fence. I think I would be for it. Now, kicks, different story. I think knees to a downed opponent, I don't think it's going to have that much of an adverse effect on fights. I think it would have a beneficial effect on fights, to be honest. How do you feel about the addition of those into mixed martial arts?
Well, to me, the issue I have, I'm all for, and I'm kind of conflicted with this really, I guess, but I'm all for fighter safety. You don't have to ask me twice about weight cutting to hear my opinion. I'm all for keeping fighters as safe as possible. However, MMA is supposed to be the breeding ground to show what is effective in fighting, full stop. So if we're saying, well, knees to a grounded opponent, whether literally on their back, inside control, whatever, knees, or grounded opponent being that they have 3 posts on the mat, we should be allowing all forms of striking, right? Now, I don't mean that you can go and headbutt. I don't think we should go full left way or whatever. We can have discussions about this, obviously. But knees to a grounded opponent feel legitimate enough that you have to time it, you have to angle it, you have to strike it, you have to build the core torque to throw it properly. There's lots of merit, I think, to knees to a grounded opponent. I actually don't have a problem with kicks to a grounded opponent either, in the same vein, right? If you're on the ground and you're not defending yourself effectively, well, then that's the fighter on bottom's fault, right? The aim of fighting, or the aim of MMA, is to show what is applicable and effective in fighting. And are we going to see that guys will wrestle up far quicker? Yes, is the answer. Yes. And if they're not, and a fighter is compromised, well, the ground and closed guard and these sorts of things aren't going to be the same safe haven that they used to be. And I think that's positive for MMA. Like, MMA at its absolute knife edge should be what's effective and what's not in fighting. Now, yes, it's a sport, and we have to have regulations and rules, and you won't be hearing me saying, oh, let's allow eye gouges and fish hooks and scratching and biting and all this stuff. What I am saying, though, is if there is a legitimate technique like stomps or soccer kicks or knees to a grounded opponent, well, then why shouldn't we implement them?
100%. I'm definitely with you with that opinion, Harry. Let's rattle through the rest, and there's only 2 fights left that we have to talk about real quick before we move on here. Brian Battle picked up a 14-second KO knockout over Gabe Green, who just decided to trundle forward here and walk straight into a right hand. I mean, everyone was saying, and Brian Battle himself was saying, oh, it made much quicker work of Gabe Green than Ian Garry did. But the difference between Gabe Green against Ian Garry was Gabe Green fought on the back foot against Ian Garry and fought on the very front foot against Brian Battle. And you just walk onto those shots, don't you, Harry? What's your quick opinions on that?
Horrendous decision making, just as bad as him and Bowen. Move on. Horrendous stuff. Okay,
brutal. Jessica Rose Clark was victim of her 3rd submission in a row. Typical fight, had a good first minute, found herself in a little bit of trouble in the clinch, ate some shots. Lisboa looked good on the feet, looked good and well-rounded, but I think, Jessica Rose Clark's tenure in the UFC probably is coming to an end at this stage, I think. And I'm sure the way you're acting there as well, you feel the same, Harry.
The problem is when she's on and when she fights to her strengths and when she gets some success in her strengths, she looks great. Like in that close guard, she bust up Lisboa, opened up that elbow, and then just makes horrendous decisions and, gets put in an armbar or starts in top lock you could see that Lisboa is searching for triangles, but she doesn't protrude her shoulders back through and land more shots. Just like super basic things that you'd expect fighters to do from such a traditional guard like close guard. And Rose Clark just doesn't do them. And then we spend 6 minutes of the first 10 minutes with Jessica Rose Clark looking to lock her hands from a clinch situation, or looking to get double unders, or looking to collect a leg. Like, there's just not enough diversity and not enough skill in Jessica Rose Clark to be competitive in the UFC in this division anymore. And that's a shame, because I feel like when we first saw her, there was bountiful upside. And when she decided to take the grappling seriously, we saw big leaps and bounds in her game. But those leaps and bounds have just stagnated, and it's not enough in modern MMA. It's just not.
Yeah, it certainly isn't. Lisboa will be back again. She's someone to keep an eye on, but she will face stiffer competition in the 135-pound division. That is for sure. That wraps us up for the UFC card. Let's move over and talk some Bellator real quick before we finish up, Harry. And I mean, the story of this card for me was trying to actually watch the event. It was an absolute nightmare to try and watch. Sign onto the Bellator.com, was brought around in a merry-go-round, had to go into a sidebar to watch live. You know, difficult enough to find it. The prelims, I had to put a VPN to watch the prelims in its own right. The main card, I got onto it, and the video on Bellator.com was just, I put up the video on the group, Harry. You've seen it for yourself. It was literally buffering every 2 seconds. And I mean, we're in 2023, where we've got lots of MMA out in the market here. As an organization and as a promotion, you've got to be making things easy for fans. You know, number one, you break the news one day before the fight card that it's only going to be available on Bellator.com for $20 for Canadian fans. So, I mean, you're giving everybody little to no notice about this card, and it's behind a paywall. The previous setup on YouTube is absolutely perfect. Okay, put it behind the paywall on YouTube if you want to. Like, you've got to be set up here. This Bellator 360 was just not good, and I wasn't the only one that didn't enjoy it either. And it was shambolic would be the word I would use, to be honest. Like, I wanted to watch this card, and I simply couldn't watch this card. And, you know, Bellator PR did send me a video replay of the whole event that didn't work either for me when I tried to watch it again after the event happened. So, I mean, I just gave up. I've seen bits and pieces of these fights. We'll talk about a handful of the fights on this card. But I think for me, the story of this was how hard it was to watch and how bad the stream was when I eventually did get onto the stream. Whereas that was just basically unwatchable. Harry, your thoughts on kind of how was your viewing experience over in London?
So we were fine because it's on the iPlayer here. And so the streaming here was okay. But the thing that just perplexes me so much is, I sort of mentioned this to you before, is we've talked ad nauseum now about how the UFC is kind of slipping in terms of the fans' enjoyment or the overarching experience of the UFC for a multitude of reasons. There's plenty of speakers corners you can go and listen to that we dissect that on. But you then have other promotions around that should be galvanizing themselves and saying, well, we are going to do our absolute best to try to chew up some of that distance that was created. And one of the imperative things that you do is you make sure people can watch your fights, right? Because on the night, there were some decent fights, there's some decent results, some decent scraps. And it was a card that held significant weight, both in the tournament and in the 185-pound division. And so why is it that, as you say, a couple of days or a day before the event, streaming options are shown and it's behind a paywall, or it's this or it's that? Where's the advertising? Where is the promotion of that event? 2 weeks out saying this is how you can get it, massive fight, whatever. We're going to Paris, we're doing this, we're doing the next thing. And yet we now end up where an entire section of the globe is having to find nefarious ways to get access to a free stream for this Bellator thing, and they can't find it, and they're having to reach out to the promotion itself. Like, that is heinous from a customer-consumer relationship. You never want your customers saying, I would really like to consume your product, but I can't. Please, can you allow me to consume your product? And when they then allow or attempt to allow you to consume it, that doesn't fucking work either. Like, this is a problem that we have talked about with Bellator for an Irish TV deal and this and that for, well, I haven't talked about it, but Shawnee and Graham have talked about it for months and months and months and months and months. And yet still we're in a sticking point where arguably the number 2 organization in mixed martial arts can't figure out how to stream some fights to the world. It is just mind-bogglingly heinous.
It's just frustrating, like, because I want to watch Bellator, I want to talk about Bellator, and I want to give Bellator their dues as well. This was a great card, and I was excited to watch it, and my excitement quickly turned to frustration when I couldn't get the prelims. It felt like I was going around in a merry-go-round. But like, the cusp of the problem here, Harry, is that you're asking the Canadian audience here, which includes myself, to pay $20 to watch a fight that you cannot watch because it's freezing every 2 minutes. So like, the importance of getting this right first time around is going to pay dividends, and who's going to return to buy that product. When you're asking someone to pay for a product, you need to be getting quality streams. You need to be getting clear and easy access to watch this event. And it just simply did not exist here. And I mean, oh my God, I'm just so frustrated. Like, I don't know who's going to be wanting. It was an absolute disaster. Like, it was a disaster. The whole thing, the way it was rolled out, and it's not the first time that Bellator have done something like this. And I just wish, and they need to get it right. But the problem and the fact of the matter is that now it may be too late, because when you don't get it right the first time around, people are not going to be willing to come back and want to do that. And we're talking about Canadian mixed martial arts market as well, that can be quite beneficial and quite profitable for Bellator too. And it just seems that they swung and they missed with this event. From what I did see of the fights, Harry, I mean, I could talk about for another 20 minutes. I was fucking frustrated as hell. Like, I was like mayhem in our WhatsApp group trying to watch this and sharing different links and views. But Fabian Edwards went out there and got the job done against Gegard Mousasi in a good, very well-rounded, one-sided, unanimous decision. Didn't look in trouble at all in that. And I know you probably didn't get to see all the fights, but what you did see, Harry, was probably a Gegard Mousasi who is at the end of his tethers when it comes to skills. He looks a shadow of his former self, but man, he's fought three different lifetimes of careers, and it had to come eventually. And it looks like we're at that point right now. Look, at all credit to Fabian Edwards as well. It was a tremendous performance against a legend, but you know, it sets up a fight against Johnny Eblen in Dublin later on this year. And it's a good time for Team Renegade, really, overall, isn't it, Harry?
It is, but the real issue you have is you're going from a Gegard Mousasi, as you say, who's really lingering around with the final embers of a fire of a fantastic career, right? And obviously, if on Friday night, Fabian had gone in and slipped up and performed poorly like we have seen him do in previous fights, Gegard would have won that fight, right? The veteran savvy and all of the technique and skills he has behind him, he would have won that fight. But this again was, to me, kind of like an IQ test. Like Shawnee has said this a number of times now, and it's really starting to stick in my brain when I think about these fights, is Fabian just has to come in, dialed in, ready, and firing on all cylinders, and he wins the fight. And guess what? He wins the fight. And the first time in Gegard Mousasi's career that he loses 2 in a row, which is an insane stat when you look at the amount of fights that he has had. I think that was his 851st fight. So, you know, fair,
in around
fair fucking play to him. But the problem I have with this is you've gone from, as I say, fighting a guy at the end of his tether to fighting Johnny Eblen. Like that is an incredibly big chasm of skill set to step into. And if I'm Fabian Edwards, I don't even know how I begin to prepare for that, because you're not going to have anywhere near the same comfortability on the feet. He's going to be hassling you. He's going to be taking you down. You're going to have to get up. He's going to wear on you. He's got decent power. And we saw in the MVP fight, he absolutely has no willingness to allow you to be competitive anywhere. There's no ounce in his body that says, I must finish this fight. It's everything to do with, I'm just going to grind out decisions and I'm going to do my best to win. And that's a really, really tough stylistic matchup from Fabian Edwards, who's coming off the biggest win of his career in a 40-something-year-old end of the tether fighter. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a...
Yeah, 100%. No, you're right. I think Fabian Edwards is going to have to level up again to face off against Johnny Eblen, who is a massive problem anywhere you go. Like, he has the ability to open up on the feet because he doesn't care about getting taken down. He can use his takedowns to set up his striking. He can use his takedowns to take you down. And I feel that, look, if we get Fabian Edwards who comes in here and can stop a takedown, I think we do have an interesting fight against Johnny Eblen. But if the fight goes the way I think it's going to go, I think it could be a long night for Fabian Edwards and an even longer night for the Dublin crowd who are going to be watching that on in September as well. But, fair play to Fabian, him and Leon doing some great things, putting Team Renegade on the map. And it'd be a great story if Fabian Edwards did somehow go and do it. The Edwards brothers, man, they do like proving people wrong. So now it's Fabian's turn to try and do that. And I agree. That test against Johnny Eblen is going to be a massive, massive, massive one. In the co-main event, Brent Primus went out there and won a unanimous decision against Mansour Barnaoui. Rolled back the years here and produced a pretty good performance there in the lightweight tournament. He will move on into the semifinals now, I believe. And it was a good performance from Brent Primus. I think a lot of people fancied Barnaoui coming in here. He had performed well, but the style of Brent Primus kind of got the job done there. Only saw flashes of this fight too. We can't really break it down fully. Any thoughts on this, Harry, or shall we move on?
I'm not shocked at the result, actually. I think you were pretty high on Mansour Barnaoui and as were we all, I think. But you can't rule out somebody that's won a title, like whatever the circumstances are that he won a title. And even to get to that position means you've got big skills. And look, he may have had some less than positive performances in his last recent runs, but he went out and did the damn thing. And again, like you, I've only seen clips, and so I can't really give a full opinion, but yeah.
That's it. And Douglas Lima did the exact same against Costello Van Steenis as well. Won a unanimous decision, a big win for him. I mean, we spoke about this fight as Costello being the new kid on the block, coming to try and take some of the shine. Douglas Lima hasn't been performing that well, but he pulled it out of it here. Now, it wasn't a vintage Douglas Lima performance, but he didn't need a vintage performance. He just needed to fucking go out there and win because he was on a losing streak. And he did that. He beat the young and up and coming prospect, and he put himself back in kind of, into the mix in the 185 pound division, I guess, after fighting at 170 for so long as well. But I mean, credit to Douglas Lima there. This was maybe set up for Costello Van Steenis to go out there and take him out. And Douglas Lima did well to win a deserved decision, didn't he?
He did. And I agree 100% that, we talk about Johnny Eblen having absolutely no willingness to finish fights or whatever. When you're in the position that Douglas Lima was in, you absolutely go out and do whatever it takes to win a fight. And if that means you hold Costello Van Steenis down for 15 minutes and you land 17 shots around and they do 0 damage, but Costello Van Steenis has absolutely no way to land his own damage, you do that. You take whatever route it is to get back in a win column. And the interesting thing he said is back up at 185, he said he felt far better in himself and his person, felt strong, felt healthy. And so, mate, fuck weight cutting is what I'm saying. Fuck weight cutting.
100%. You did catch Kane Moose's fight? Did you catch Kane Moose's fight? No, did you catch the knockout?
I did see the knockout. Yeah. Rough.
Bit of a shock. Yeah, bit of a shock. It was a pretty brutal knockout. Got caught in an exchange against Thibault Gouti, and it was a great win for the Frenchman on home soil against Kane Moussa that had been performing well up into this fight, and he'll be disappointed that he got caught there, but it was a pretty brutal knockout, wasn't it, Harry?
Yeah, it's fucking absolutely savage. I mean, yeah, he didn't wear it well, did he? You know, as a
No.
number of shots, a number of concussive blows, and then the one that put him down really put him down. I don't know.
Luka Pocklet picked up a win for SBG and capped off a pretty good weekend all around for SBG across the board against Oliver Enkamp. Picked up a unanimous decision there. Good win against a good opponent for Pocklet, and he is on the rise in the 170-pound division. That's 2 in a row for him in Bellator. Yves Landau picked up a good win over Peter Nedzinski. That was a very impressive win. I think Nedzinski is not an easy out, and credit to him. We're going to stop at Asela Juge, who took on George Sasu. I know you did catch this fight. Let's talk about it, and we can kind of round up the breakdowns this week talking about Asela Juge. I'm interested to hear your opinions on his performance. Very well-rounded performance again from Asel. I think he landed some good shots on the feet, showed some good composure on the ground, got himself in some dominating positions. And yeah, made a couple of mistakes in round 3, but definitely deserved the unanimous decision overall. How do you break down his performance, Harry?
Really good first 2 rounds. Controlled Sasu, some really nice takedowns, some really good clinch work, good damage on the feet, good damage on the ground. And then the 3rd round, he just made a small slip up, just was a bit too overeager on a shot, finds himself slipping, doesn't allow himself enough time to get back up, doesn't scramble quick enough. And then Sasu just dominates on top. And Asel didn't look good at getting back to his feet. Eventually works to underhooks, but isn't able to use them. Not a good performance and a glaring hole that's been shown to Asel. But when you're his age and when you're his experience, it's perfect, actually. You go out, you win 2 rounds, and you win 2 rounds really handy. You show off all of your offensive work, really beautiful kickboxing, great stance switching, had Sasu biting on all types of feints, lit him up on the feet, take him down, put him against the fence, do some nice grappling on the bottom, hit some damage on the bottom, nice. And then you're shown a glaring hole. And that's something for him and Dave Roach and Coach John Kavanagh to take away and to say, okay, well, this is clearly the thing that we're going to work on now in the next little while. And we're going to chuck you in with the Gary Rooneys and the this and the that. And we're going to get you to positions where you're back up on your feet far more efficiently.
Yeah, I mean, like on the feet, there can be nothing else said, only that when he gets into that kind of flow state with his striking is absolutely tremendous to look at. But guys are going to be looking at that round 3 as that gaping hole, and they're going to be trying to put Asel on his back. And yeah, look, he's at a stage in his career where he still needs to work on that. He will work on that. He will get better, and he's a very exciting prospect. I mean, he's all the talk from all the fighters in SPG that he's the one to watch, and it will be interesting to see his career progression as well. And before we wrap it up, Harry, I'll throw it over to you for any final thoughts on maybe on the overall action this weekend. Another weekend full of stories and talking points again that we had the chance to break down here over the last hour and 20 minutes or so. What's your overall assessment?
I have a little bit of MMA fatigue, if I'm honest. Some of the fights I was, super impressed with Ian Garry. Not blown away by Jailton Almeida. I think if somebody put a gun to my head and said, how does the fight go? I think that's how I would have described the fight to go.
We were living in a little bit more hope than anything else that Jairzinho would have put up a bigger fight, but ultimately he didn't.
Absolutely. And I don't know. I think the UFC seems in like a really serious lull. And I know we've got some big cards coming up, but you talk about Bellator and it feels the same, streaming issues and this and that and the next thing. Like the most fun I've had watching an MMA event in the last little while was one Fight Night 10.
Now you said it. I'm the exact same.
That's because they literally put every big star they have out on that card, and fair play to them for doing it. It was wonderful. It was an absolutely fantastic showing of mixed martial arts. But I look around the MMA landscape at the moment and yeah, I just feel a little bit of fatigue. Like I don't know what it is, but I mean, we all go through these and it happens, I get it. But Yeah, I don't know.
Well, lucky for you, we have a big one coming up next week in Mackenzie Dern and Angela Hill. We'll talk about that on the preview show. We will be back on Thursday to break down that UFC card. Thank you so much for your insight, your opinion, and your knowledge, Harry. It's always a pleasure here on the Balance Breakdown. And as always, we'll be back every Tuesday to take a look at all the action in the world of mixed martial arts, break it down from an analytical point of view, talk about some of the stories. Until Thursday, guys, we will see you then. I hope you're having a good week, and we'll see you soon. Follow Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell. Check out the Severe Spotlight on Ian Garry. Fantastic article each and every Monday. Check out the Severe MMA Patreon account. Check out Severe MMA check out the Severe MMA Patreon account. Yeah, lots of great stuff on there. Owl Triangle, everything. We'll see you soon. Fair play to you for tuning in. Hit the like button and the subscribe button, and we will talk to you soon.